Good morning, everyone. I am Joanne Koontz. I am here with my partner, Jackie Durham, and we have our frequent repeat guest participant today, John Seiffer. John is a failed employee, multiple business owner, and now illustrious business coach. So we definitely tap into his advice on a regular basis and like to bring that to you too. So today we were going to bring to you a topic that is part of why we went to John in the beginning. And that really is an interesting exercise that John put us through called the missing piece. And that's all about how to get the perfect fit for the team members that your team might be needing. We have frequently been guilty of asking a fish to climb a tree. So whether it's adding new folks or working on your current team, John's always full of insight. So without further ado, thank you for joining us, John.
All right, well, thank you very much. Let me get the screen share going here. And you know, hiring is hard, and I'm hoping that this webinar will make it a little bit easier for you. I'd like to thank the team at Koontz Group for having me on. And as Joanne said, my name is John Seiffer. I'm a failed employee. I'm totally unemployable. I've really never had a job. I've just been a business owner my adult life. So I've started companies, bought some, sold some, run a bunch. And you can't grow a company without good people. But it took me a long time to find out how to find them. I used to place ads that would get hundreds of totally unqualified applicants, and wading through that, boy, that was just so painful. So today's lesson, I hope, will help you learn from my mistakes. So let's get started. So, of course, I'm not right about this. Most people hate hiring, but something worse than hiring is actually having to fire somebody. That's the worst part of any entrepreneur's job. But guess what? The better you get at hiring, the less firing you have to do. And hiring poorly costs time and money, and then the person doesn't work out, and you have to put up with them hoping it'll get fixed. And meanwhile, the others on your team are dispirited, and they're not as productive as they should be because there's some slacker there. And then finally you let them go after a few sleepless nights. Did I mention firing people is worse than hiring them? And then you go through the whole thing again, spend time and money, etc., and you hope you got it right this time. Well, most people start at the wrong place. They think that this is where the process starts. But in reality, finding candidates is actually the second part. And to do it well, you have to start at the beginning, which is defining what you want. With a good definition, it's much easier to find what you want, and then discovering where those people are. That's the second step. And then the third step is deciding who to hire. And most people stop there. And the fourth step is actually the missing piece, one of the missing pieces, which is bringing them on board, integrating them into your organization. And that's as important as the other steps. Today, we're just going to get into the first step, defining what you want. It's usually called a job description. And often people think, well, I'll just look up a job description for this title and everything will be fine. But job descriptions aren't generic, especially in small companies. And so you have to start with, why are you hiring anybody in the first place? And you're hiring them because there's a gap in your organization, a hole that you require a piece of a certain shape to fill. So before you start thinking about the missing piece and finding that person, let's take some time to understand the gap. After you've done that, it's easier to find the missing piece. So what is missing? Well, the first thing that's missing is elves. And these are a specific kind of elves. These aren't Santa's elves. These aren't Keebler elves. These are elves from a children's fairy tale called The Shoemaker and the Elves. And the shoemaker was working late at night. He had all these shoes to make, had pieces of leather and shoe bits all over his workshop, and he falls asleep at his bench. And while he's asleep, the elves come in the middle of the night, make all his shoes, and disappear. And when he wakes up, how does he know that the elves were there? Because he can see something different than when he went to sleep. He saw what the elves did. So what's really missing, not elves, but production, output. You are hiring somebody to fill a gap of some kind of output. And this is where you want to define that output properly. I'll give you an example. It's not why it's not generic. Let's say you're looking for somebody who's a social media marketer. Well, what's the output you expect from them? You could define that output in terms of, I need to have so many posts on these different channels, every week or whatever. If you define the social media job that way, then that kind of presumes that you know what channels work to get the result that you want, that you know your buyer's journey will respond. And if you have so many posts in this category and so many pictures on Instagram, et cetera, that you will get the leads and eventually the sales that you want. But what if you don't know that and you still want to hire a marketing social media person? Well, now the output you want from that person is different. The output you want from that person is to run some experiments, to figure out which posts go where and how often and how frequently and what are the right channels. And so that output that you would want from that person is experiments and analysis of that results. And in many cases, particularly with more strategic individuals, the output that you need is questions that you want answered, or decisions that you want them to make, or even questions that you want them to ask. So the first step in defining your position, the gap that you're trying to fill, is to define the output properly. And you know when you've got it properly defined when two things are true. One is they could come in like the elves, do their work at midnight while you're asleep, go away, and you would come in and see what they did. And you can define the output that way, that if I see this, then I know you're doing a good job. The second piece is that you've described it so well that you can take that output description right off your job description and use it as their performance review in 6 or 8 months. And you can say, well, here's what we hired you to do. Did you do that? And there's a one-to-one match there. If you've done those two things, then you've defined the output properly. There's some other things in defining the position, but they're all minor compared to the output. I'll mention them briefly. One is the relationships. This is who do they report to, who reports to them, et cetera. The other one is what resources will they have to work with? What budget or other resources will they have to do their job? And the other is there may be some extras that you kind of assume this person will do that aren't technically a part of their job description. Well, it's worthwhile putting those down. So for example, maybe this is the person you expect to coordinate your holiday party, or they're the one that will be escorting out-of-town visitors around or something like that. And it's not really a part of their job description, but it's worth putting in your definition of the position. So you can see how these 4 things, with output being the most important, they actually define the hole in your organization that you're trying to fill. Once you've done that, now we can look at defining the piece. The piece is what you expect that person to bring on board, to bring to your company. And it's important when you do this part that you really distinguish what's absolutely required from what's nice to have. So do they really need to speak French? Do they really need to know this much detail about XYZ? And the reason it's important to lower those requirements to what's really required is because you'll get a much more diverse and a much broader applicant pool if you do that. There's been studies that show women particularly do not apply to a job unless they feel they can meet 100% of the requirements. Guys, for example, will do the opposite. If I'm 50, 60%, I'm good, I'm gonna go there. But you want more women, you want more diversity, you want more, a broader pool, and so you wanna lower those barriers. Google has done a lot of research on this internally, and one of the things they found is that a college degree is not actually required for a lot of their jobs. So they've stopped putting that in the requirements. And that's really something to think about. Often that's kind of put in there just because, and then you go, well, wait a minute, do they really need to know this? Or could we hire somebody with less requirements? So make those requirements absolutely required and not just the nice to have. The thing that shows up on most requirements is skills. This is the most common thing described in a job description, but it's often the easiest to do without, particularly with entry-level people. These are skills can be taught and learned on site, and if people have the right characteristics other than their skills, as we'll get to in a minute, then it's sometimes better to hire the right person and train the skills than hold out for the right skills. So skills are one of the missing pieces. The other thing that you expect somebody to bring to the job is knowledge of certain areas, knowledge of certain techniques, whatever. Another one is relationships. These are people that you expect that person could come in and the people they have connections with would return their phone calls, for example, or return their emails. Often people hire salespeople expecting that they'll come in with a book of business, that they'll come in with a whole bunch of customers that they can call on, etc. Doesn't always work out as good as they hoped, but it's something to think about. But the most important part in defining what you want that person to bring is character traits. This is the most important part because it doesn't change. It's hard enough for a person to change their own character traits. It's virtually impossible for an employer to try to do it. So if you hire somebody with the wrong traits, you're going to be stuck with that person. And by character traits, I don't mean are they honest, are they hardworking? Those are the character traits that obviously you want those, but the opposite of those, nobody wants those. I'm talking about the character traits where one side of the trait is great for a certain job, and another side is terrible for that job, but terrific for a different job. I'll give you some examples. So if is somebody creative, or are they detail oriented? People who are very creative tend to have a lot of new ideas, but they don't always get the details right. People who are detail oriented aren't always creative. So think about the social media person we were talking about a minute ago. For those two different aspects, the different output that you'd expect, you'd want one to be very analytical and very detail oriented, and you might want the other one to have more ideas and be more creative. Is somebody a take charge individual, or are they better at following directions? Is somebody collaborative, or are they more independent? Is somebody a quick learner or not? What's required in those character traits for this particular job? Not the kind of person you just want to have around, but for that particular job. Are they outgoing? Are they introverted? Are they motivated by money? Are they motivated by hierarchy and power, or social or other things? So these are things to think about. And it's actually complicated, but I've come up with a list of different character traits that I've collected over the years. So I've got a handout for you if you want that. And you can look through this list and say which kind of person is right for this this job. And one of the ways you can do that, if you've had somebody in that job in the past, or if you had multiple people, you can look at what character traits are similar among the people that were successful in that job, or the ones that were similar and the people that weren't successful at that job, and maybe pick out the kinds of things that you're looking for. So these are the 4 parts of defining the person that you're looking for, what they bring to your company. And like I said, character traits are the most important part. The third thing you have to do is define the offering. Why should they work for you? Hiring is a sales job. You're trying to sell somebody. Once you've determined that they're the right person, you're trying to sell them on coming on board with your company. And so you have to offer things that they want. Obviously, salary is part of it, benefits. Many small companies think, well, we can't afford benefits like the big companies can. And maybe that's true, but there may be advantages to working with your company that a big company can't offer. Maybe you have flexibility. Maybe you have a certain career potential. Maybe they can work with different kinds of customers or different kinds of projects that they work on that they couldn't get in a big company. So think about the actual benefits of working in your company. And that becomes part of the offering. So once you've got these 3 things together, you've defined the position, you've defined the missing piece, you've defined the offering, you have what I call the hiring canvas. So that's where you map out this, and I've got another handout for this. It goes into what we just covered in a little more detail and gives you a place to write down, this is the offering, this is the missing piece, this is the stuff that I'm looking for to fill the gap here. So that becomes your actual job description, the fullness of your job description for each potential piece that you're hiring for. But wait, there's more. If you call right now, the one thing I want to mention is that the hiring canvas that you just did is not the ad that you will put on Indeed or wherever you put your ads. It's not the same thing, and here's why. You should not include the character traits in the ad. Because if you do that, somebody's going to game the interview. If you say we're looking for a team player, guess what? They're going to show up with all these stories about how they're a team player. If you say we're looking for an individualist superstar who can do it without a team, that same person is going to show up to the interview with all these stories about how they're an individual superstar and don't need a team. So you want to leave that out. When I do another webinar on how you decide on the right person, we'll talk about how you can suss out those character traits. What you do want to include in the ad, though, in addition to some of the other things, is why you should work at our place. What's so cool about working here? And you also want to include a filter. A filter is something that will eliminate the wrong people from even applying and not wasting your time. And it will also attract the right people. Let me give you a couple of examples of a filter. I knew a guy who had a company, they had trucks that went around to different businesses, and they took those, those welcome mats that had the company name and logo on them and stuff, and they brought them every week and they cleaned them and brought them back. And his trucks left the warehouse at 6 in the morning. So his filter was, if you want to apply for a job, we do our interviews at 6 in the morning. Show up at the warehouse. Because if somebody wasn't going to show up for the interview at 6, they certainly weren't going to show up on time. Another one is if somebody needs a good phone voice for this particular position, well, have them call and do a phone interview first. Give them a specific time to call, or we do this on Wednesday mornings. Here's how to schedule it, and then do the phone interview first. Another company I worked with. They're hiring entry-level bookkeepers, and they expect a certain amount of knowledge of bookkeeping, even though it's an entry-level position. And they were getting people that just had no clue. So they put a quiz online. If you want to apply for this job, click here. It was a Google form. They fill out the questions, then they can go through and kind of filter out and not even waste their time with people that don't know what they're talking about. So whatever it is that's specific to your company and your job, include some kind of filter will make it a little bit easier for you. So I know we've covered lots of different things today. There's more in those handouts that you can review at your own time. But here are 3 things that are just to take away from today. The first is describe the outputs in measurable detail. The second is define the character traits that are the right kind of person for that job. And the third is separate the internal job description that you use internally from the ad that you're going to place. So thank you for your time. If you'd like a copy of this deck, I know the recording will be up on the Koontz website. If you'd like a copy of the handouts, email me. Just let me know which session you want the slides or the handout for, and I'll be happy. It's john@ceobootcamp.com. There's more at my website, ceobootcamp.com. And one of the things I do is help companies design their hiring system. So if I can help in any way, again, email me. Thank you much.
Thank you so much. I can't say enough about how easy that sounds in your presentation.
Yeah.
And what
it's simple, but it's not easy. Look, if it was easy, everybody'd be an entrepreneur.
That's right. I can say, even after having been through so many sessions with you and working specifically on this particular piece, it's like your knee-jerk reaction to write the list of tasks to be completed. And I don't know how many times I've actually stolen your phrase and said, I'm not tracking activity, I'm tracking accomplishments. And it's very difficult to actually define that. So you can say, here's what I need. And in your head, you're thinking about all the things that you need off your plate or that you need off of a team member's plate. And it's just so easy to have that be your knee-jerk reaction and to fill the ad or the list with those things that are not what to do. And where this is really going to be pointed is it was necessary before, but now if you're going to have people work from home, it's the only way. So people are going to get forced into this as we have more work from home opportunities for people to say, how will I know you did anything? And I remember a few times we would lament to John and be like, this one's not doing this or whatever. And he'd be like, well, how do you know? Like, you think that because of this thing you're complaining about, but how do you know that they didn't get anything done? And it's like, well,
Right. And that's really the manager's job, is to define what a good job looks like. Particularly hard with knowledge work.
mhm.
It's easier with physical work. If your job is to paint this room, it's kind of easy to know when you started, when you're halfway done, you know, when you're finished. But when it's knowledge work, it's much harder, and it's really on us as the managers to describe that.
And it is not without need for practice to get better at doing that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say we're good yet, but we're getting better.
Yeah, I think we are. And I think that, John, maybe this will be a future segment, but I think that you offer some really good suggestions about how to measure performance and progress in different employees, depending on what role they play. So, you know, that has also been very helpful for our firm. So.
Yeah. And one of the things about entrepreneurs is we tend to be very intuitive and not procedural. So we just tend to kind of assume what a good job looks like and assume that everybody will know that.
Yeah.
But it's really on us. It's kind of like a chef that makes good food but doesn't follow a recipe. Well, if you want to hire employees and scale your company, you need to put that intuition into a recipe kind of formula as much as possible.
Right.
So true. Again, so easy, so guilty here. Perfect. Thank you so much for your time and your continued contribution, John. We really appreciate it, and we can see from the attendee list that those regulars that won't miss you do as well. So next week, if you're up for it, today Marina is not with us because she's recovering from the tax season deadline, which finally ended. The 2019 tax filing season is finally over in 2021. Next week, she's back at it though, and we're going to be talking about non-resident tax filing requirements. So whether you or clients or colleagues of yours maybe spend some time in US and not all the time, there may be some tax information there that's helpful for them. As always, our videos and our webinars are recorded and distributed on our YouTube channel, on the Koontz Associates and KoontzParkin.com websites, and also on our Facebook pages. So if you have questions about this or any other topic, you're welcome to email us. We can certainly provide you, John, contact details as well. And if you have ideas for future sessions, you're welcome to let us know that as well. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next Tuesday.